today we're joined by multi-award winning artist, a rebel songstress, a woman who represents and epitomizes freedom, Thandiswa Mazwai, who is due to launch a new album, Sankofa, tomorrow on the 10th of May. And her first launch is at Carnival City. And I just want to ask you one question. Thandiswa, how are you, by the way?
I'm good. How are you?
We're very well, thank you. Is there any significance with releasing the album on the 10th of May?
I don't think there's much of a significance, but I mean, the album was supposed to be released in 2022, and then it was 2023, and then it was 2024. So everything is kind of serendipity has conspired to make it that the album is released now at this time when we're about to go into election season, and everyone is really nervous about what's going to come up next. So I don't think that it was like a conscious plan, but it just kind of happened in this way.
And when we look at you, I see it's like a freedom warrior, and that's something that you've emphasized over the years. And also looking at how you ushered South Africa into a new democratic dispensation with Jackknife and Bongo Muffin. And if we look at that woman from that era and that age to the Thandiswa, we just celebrated her 48th birthday not so long ago. What change or what significance has freedom had, in your world? And also thinking about the fact that we were just celebrating 30 years of freedom.
That's a big question. I think in 1994, I had a huge sense of hope. We were all so excited. There was such a huge kind of euphoria in the air. And people, it was possible. Everything was possible. Remember, back then it was South Africa alive with possibilities. And we really did feel that way. And being a young person at that time was really exciting because everything was at your fingertips. If you wanted to start a fashion brand, you could. You wanted to start a record label, you did. And so that's what all the young people at that time were doing. We were starting labels. It was an exciting time. But I think there was always this kind of ominous cloud hanging over, wondering what would happen next, And the next 30 years, what has now been the last 30 years, has shown us that, indeed power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that the role of the citizen to fight back against what politicians are doing in parliament is now even more important, for people to go and register and vote and choose the person that they want to put in that parliament. So I am less excited than I was then, and less optimistic than I was then. And I guess right now there's a greater vigor, there's a greater sense of the responsibility to hold on to this freedom, because we realize that the politicians will not keep it for us. They will keep it for themselves.
Thank you for that. Sticking in the same sort of vein, you've followed you're inspired by a lot of artists that had agency in terms of using their music as a political instrument.
Yes.
And it's something that I believe that you still do today. What would you say about artists who don't use the instruments or their artistry as a sort of like an instrument to further the political agenda 30 years into democracy, when things are actually going a bit south or pear-shaped?
I'm of the view that any artist who creates any work is making a political statement. Whether that statement is overt or not, whether that statement is about reflecting society or showing or trying to expose society to new thinking. For instance, if the young Amapiano kids are only writing about alcohol, that's all they write about, that's what they dance to, that is a reflection of the time. And so that work is political in the sense that it is so radically reflecting the time without trying to whitewash it, without trying to dilute that. So I still think that every artist is really doing what they are called to do. And doing that in itself is political, because it's a radical act to be yourself. So even if you're just, you're not really writing overtly political lyrics, the idea of being radically yourself does change people's world, change people's lives.
And the political climate,
Yes.
ultimately.
Yes.
When we look and revisit Sankofa, which means to reclaim,
Yes.
it's Twi, right?
Yes.
One of the Ghanaian languages. We look at your the song Ulungile. That song is almost 6 minutes long,
Yes.
and when I listen to that song, it's almost like a journey into freedom. It starts on a very poignant note. It builds up, and then there's almost like a celebration of a sort of found freedom towards the end of the song.
Yeah.
And if we were to personify South Africa as a child, because there's a song about childhood trauma. If we look at South Africa as a
I
child,
thought of it that way.
if we look at South Africa and personify it as a child, would you say that this child is ridden of the trauma? 30 years into democracy.
No, I think the trauma actually gets worse because now, I mean, I think that there's a trauma when you think something is going to happen and then it doesn't happen. This dream deferred adds to the layer of trauma that especially Black South Africans are experiencing because there was a bone of hope and that hope has been dashed. For me now, things are, all we have to do is look at our personal to understand what the collective really is. And in my personal life, in my family, most people don't have jobs. Most people are depressed, heavily depressed. And so they are drinking and they are, so many people, so many of my family members who live ekasi. That's the lifestyle. That's the experience. It's like you're unemployed, you're depressed, you're drinking, you're doing drugs, you've been to prison, you don't have any hope, and that's why we say to each other, uzoba strong, because you have nothing. The only thing you can do is be strong, and that's a tragedy for Black people. It's a tragedy for the people of this country to have to be strong.
So if I were to sort of do a summation of what you just responded to, so this child called South Africa is still in a traumatized state,
Yes.
which is manifested in the social ills that we get to see on a daily basis.
Yes, definitely. I think we definitely need a collective therapy. I don't know how we're going to do that, but we need something that's going to definitely get us out of the dark, out of the rut of this Black condition,
And as a Pan-Africanist, you're very overt and bold about that. There's a song of yours on the Tiny Desk, which is very brilliant delivery, by the way, of performance.
Okay.
When we look at the song, Children of the Soil, that song, when you start that song, you speak about a freedom that you wish upon everyone in the world.
Yes.
And you sort of reinforce your passion for freedom.
Yes.
I just want to know, and if we look at what's happening now, elections are around the corner, and there's a lot of xenophobia in some of the manifestos from political parties. Yeah. As a Pan-Africanist, what message do you have to a xenophobe?
Well, first of all, I think that it's interesting that which words we choose, right? Like xenophobia means a fear of foreigners, but we don't fear German foreigners, French foreigners. We don't fear Portuguese foreigners. We don't fear a white foreigner, right? So it's really not xenophobia. It's much deeper than that. And I think that's the thing that we need to understand is that when this is much more nuanced, what this Afrophobia is, that it's really about economics. It's about people struggling for sustenance, struggling for work, and that there's a huge influx of people from other parts of Africa and Southeast Asia coming to South Africa to look for better lifestyle. And this it's not just that simple, right? There's so many things going on. It's very, very layered. There are criminals, but there are also women who need a hospital coming from other countries. So we have to be careful of the language that we use and who we're pointing fingers at. I would point the finger at government and government officials and the police system, because they're the ones who take bribes at the border gates. They're the ones who take bribes so that buildings in the city can be taken over by criminals or drug lords, they're the ones who take bribes from drug lords. So it is not really the way the system, the way that things are in South Africa in terms of people from other parts of the world is an indictment on our systems, not those people. Because if you come to a lawless country, you're welcome to be lawless. And South Africa is a lawless country. Our politicians are lawless. And if the politicians are lawless, it's very easy for everybody else to start thinking of how can we be lawless in order to survive.
In South Africa.
In South Africa. And for South Africans too, there are many undocumented South Africans. So we are just in a crazy place where our leadership has abandoned us so that all kinds of ill can fester in South Africa. So I don't say these Zimbabweans, I say criminals, criminal thinkers, criminal minds, because I am Zimbabwean, I am Senegalese, I'm Mozambican, I am Congolese, I am an African. When I was growing up, we used to call each other Africa, not South Africa. It was Africa, So I belong to the whole continent, and the how the continent is at the moment is an indictment on all our governments. The Zimbabwean government, the Mozambican government, all the governments, and governments from outside of Africa, the Americans, the Chinese, the Russians, all of these people who have vested interests in Africa and what happens here are really affecting the general lives of ordinary people every day. So we have to be aware of the bigger picture. These are not just people that are landing up here by some chance. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. That was a bit of a quiet and comprehensive mouthful.
Thank you.
Going back to your music, to the album Sambofa. I've seen a lot of your performances. It's almost as if when you sing or when you deliver your music, something takes over you. And I'm telling you, from my personal experience, once one walks away from your concert, they walk away with an experience. What can we expect on your delivery of Sambofa?
Well, let me tell you this. Thank you for saying that about the show, because it is intentional in some ways, in the sense that before I get on the stage, I really do a lot of praying to ask the guides, whatever this gift is, wherever it comes from, I say, okay, so may this gift today do its work, really do its work. So when that happens, we're all served by the gift. And with Carnival City this Saturday, we're hoping the same thing happens, We're praying for that. Sometimes it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen often that it doesn't happen, but sometimes we don't get magic in the room. And every show is different. And we're hoping that there's magic, there's fellowship, there's joy, there's healing in the room. So when you come with an open heart so that we can manifest these things.
Thank you so much, Thandiswa Mazwai, King Ta. And I know the little ones call you Auntie King Ta.
The small ones, they call me Auntie King Ta.
Which is very sweet. We'll have to end it there. Tomorrow is the official release of Sambofa. Saturday, catch Thandiswa Mazwai at Carnival City. She'll also be at Artscape as well as Durban.